Hello, and welcome to Module 16, Progress Monitoring and Data Collection. In this module, we'll learn about progress monitoring and data collection as it relates to the IEP process. This module will take approximately 1 hour to complete. Before we begin the module, here are a few quick reminders about paraprofessional modules. First, be sure to follow along with your anticipation guide. Anticipation guides can be downloaded from the website or at the beginning of this module. Be sure to complete the questions within each section before moving on. Finally, if you have any questions, there is a box at the end where you can record your questions before submitting the module. Module 16 is broken down into 3 parts. Part 1, definitions and reasons for progress monitoring. Part 2, ways to monitor progress. And Part 3, role of paraprofessionals in progress monitoring. We will now begin with Part 1, definitions and reasons for progress monitoring. Before we can begin discussing the process of progress monitoring, we have to define some other terms related to the process. First, let's discuss assessment. Assessment broadly refers to the process of gathering information and data about what students know and are able to do. In special education, this is very important because we need to know what our students are able to do and also what they are unable to do. Skills that students have not yet mastered become the basis for their IEP goals. Another term we need to define is data. Data is the written information that reflects what is observed or measured in educational assessments. Often, data is described in charts and graphs to make it easier for everyone to understand. This data shows how students are making progress toward their various goals. Next, let's define evaluation. Evaluation is the process of interpreting and making judgments about assessment information to apply to instruction. Special education teachers spend a lot of time evaluating assessment data to decide how to best teach students and meet their needs. As paraprofessionals, you support this process by trying different methods and strategies for academics and behavior. Now that we've defined some of those terms, let's talk specifically about progress monitoring. Progress monitoring is an ongoing process of assessment and evaluation that involves 2 main components: collecting and analyzing data to determine student progress, which we know is assessment, and making instructional decisions based on the review and analysis of student data, which we know as evaluation. So we are taking 2 of those components we just discussed, assessment and evaluation, to think about the progress that students are making. Teachers are continually using assessment data to evaluate student progress and make instructional decisions based on that data. Let's look at this example graph on the right side of the slide. The red line is the goal line, or where we want the student to be reading in this example. On the left side of the graph, we can see that we are measuring words read correctly. And on the right-hand side, on the bottom, we can see that we are measuring in increments of weeks of instruction. The green point shows us where the student actually scores. As you can see, the progress monitoring data seems to indicate that the instruction is working and the student is even beginning to exceed the goal right around week 7. A teacher looking at this progress monitoring data would likely say that the type of instruction the student is receiving is working and that the student is making adequate progress. If the student continues with this same instruction, we would expect that by the time week 12 of instruction comes around, the student would meet or exceed that goal endpoint of 40 words read correctly. This overall is an example of the progress monitoring reports and evaluations that teachers are making in the special education process. Now that we understand a little bit more about what progress monitoring is, let's discuss some of the reasons for using progress monitoring, particularly in special education. First, it is important because legally, educators must measure progress towards IEP goals. We are obligated to ensure that students are making meaningful progress toward the goals listed within their IEPs. Another reason for progress monitoring is to determine if the instructional methods align and are working. For example, if a student is using a specialized reading program, such as the Wilson program, for example, it is important for the teacher to be sure the methods are working and the student is making progress. If the student is not making progress, it might be time to try a different program or a different instructional method. Progress monitoring can also be helpful for determining if the correct instructional level is being used within the curriculum. Sometimes the student might actually be able to work above their grade level in a particular subject, like math. Progress monitoring is also important because it gives the teacher a way to report progress to IEP team members, including parents and family members. When students enter new classrooms or new settings, progress monitoring can also be helpful to determine what skills the students have already mastered and what skills still need to be learned. Now let's talk about some of the benefits of progress monitoring. Using progress monitoring allows educators to base decisions on data rather than best guesses, opinions, feelings, or perceptions of IEP team members. It also leads to improved outcomes for students. Research has shown that using data is objective and legally defensible, which is important because IEPs are legal documents that cannot contain opinions or goals that are based on feelings. Finally, progress monitoring prevents students from receiving services or supports that are ultimately not beneficial. To summarize, progress monitoring helps educators ensure that learners with disabilities are making adequate progress toward the goals outlined in their IEPs. This is the end of Part 1 of Module 16. Remember to complete the questions before moving on to Part 2.